Hello, Exiles. This is Ryan from Behind Eyes Gaming, and welcome to another Path of Exile video. I was going to take a break today, but the patch notes dropped last night, so I went through them and I noticed a few things that I'll go over here. I have decided I am going to league start my Frost Blades Trickster. One of the reasons, as you can see, Frost Blades has now 110% effectiveness of added damage at level 1 from 100% and scaling up to 225% at level 20 from 175%. The downside being it no longer has quality that gives 0 to 20% increased damage. It also loses some projectile speed, which is, it's a little bit of a thing, but you still get it on the quality. And more importantly, this now opens up the option to permanently run Divergent Frost Blades, which is pretty big. And we already get a little over 300% increased damage on the build usually. As I will pull up here, the kind of refined version, once you get up to like level 90, 95, starting adding cluster jewels, has 301% total main hand increased damage. So losing 20% is a little bit, but not too much. And more importantly, we're gaining so much damage effectiveness that it more than makes up for it. Therefore, if we run the Divergent version, we will get increased duration of cold ailments, which will allow us to freeze more easily. So that is now open as an option. Might not get there in solo self-found unless you like to do a lot of heisting, but interesting thing to consider. So the downside is there was a slight nerf in that we no longer would be running Withering Step, as it no longer resets the elusive. But I have here elusive set to 110%. We have 220% maximum, so 110 is half of it. So this will be our average damage. Previously, with Withering Step, I looked through video footage and timed it. The average was about 165. So we're losing about 18% damage there. However, instead, for instance, on this tree, let's just pull up the old calculator. The gem at level 20 will now provide 28% more damage, and assuming it goes up at the similar like 5.5% or so, scaling to gem level 21, it'll be about 30% increased damage. So we can just take the 13, 7, 34, 8, 10 number here and multiply it by 1.28. I think I have level 20 Frost Blades here. Okay, I do have level 21. But we'll just say it's a level 20 and it's 28%. So we're actually gaining 2 million DPS with this setup, which is obviously not the end game, but this is like the stage where we start really smashing pinnacle bosses and stuff when we get, our timeless jewel and our cluster jewel setup. So, and Circle of Fear as well. And I have a complete guide on how to do all of this step by step. It's in the notes right here. I'll leave this POB, but I also have a complete walkthrough with everything explained. And I will put that, I have a playlist with all of my Frostblade stuff that I'll leave in the description below if you want to check that out. And it's the video that's just a step-by-step guide, level 1 through pinnacle bosses. And it's a pretty long video, but I really go over everything. So if you want to league start this and have like an hour and 20 minutes, I think it is, definitely worth your time. You'll be able to very easily league start this. A couple of changes though. Spectral Helix was nerfed. Now instead of damage effectiveness 150 at level 1, it has 100. But thing about Spectral Helix is its damage effectiveness was good, but what made it really overpowered is its mechanics. So it also has a 110% attack speed multiplier, which is a thing, and it also hits most enemies, especially bosses, at least twice. So you can kind of think of the old Spectral Helix as 150% damage multiplier. You can basically double that, and also add in the attack speed multiplier, and it was almost like having a 1 attack speed multiplier like a normal gem, with 360% damage effectiveness. Now with the new numbers, it's basically equivalent to 220% damage effectiveness. So obviously that's a huge nerf, but it's still probably better than most gems. Now, the thing to consider as well, though, is that means because it's hitting for lower numbers now, armor will mitigate more effectively against it. So things like Merveil, which is one of the main, reasons we would use it, is against bosses. Bosses tend to have higher armor numbers. It's possible that it might lose even more damage effectiveness there. If that's the case, we have a couple of backup plans, and I'm going to update this POB as soon as POB itself updates to the new tree, and I will update all the notes when that happens as well. But just as an overview, our backup plans are, well, we can just use Frost Blades. Frost Blades at level 12 should be level 5, assuming the damage effectiveness scales linearly. Previously, it had a damage effectiveness. By the time you got to Merveil, it went up like 4.15% per level or so. So it would have a damage effectiveness at level 5 of like 116%. Now it starts at 110 and gets like 5.5% per. So it should have about 132%, if my math is right, damage effectiveness. So 116 to 132 is pretty big, especially considering flat damage is added and accounting for added cold. Frost Blades might be enough single target to actually boss with now. We'll have to see. I'm going to test Spectral Helix and Frost Blades. I'll probably grab both. Additionally, there's two other options. First of all, there's good old reliable Explosive Trap. Shadow has access to Explosive Trap for just 1 Wisdom Scroll. And then I believe also for a Wisdom or maybe a Transmute, you can get the Quick Construction or whatever, the one that lets you potentially throw extra mines or traps. Clever Construction, whichever it is, and then Added Cold also uses 3 green links. You can do that. Also at level 12, you get Reeve, which has 170% damage effectiveness at level 1. Reeve might be an option as well, because honestly, it should scale just about as well. It's about even in damage with Frost Blades if you do not have any additional damage currently, like if you don't have any iron rings, if you don't have a weapon with additional damage. But if you do have additional damage, besides just the added cold, Reeve will outscale it. So if you get a weapon, let's say an Awl or whatever, which is a level 12 claw, that has % physical damage, or it has some flat elemental damage on it or something, if you get anything like that, Reeve should outscale, even with the new numbers, Frost Blades. So if you want to stay melee, that might be the option. And I think by time you hit Act 2 or 3, Frost Blades, and definitely by time you get multi-strike, Frost Blades will start to potentially outscale either one as far, especially considering we're going to go melee nodes. But those are our kind of backup plans if Spectral Helix doesn't feel good, and if Frost Blades doesn't feel good, either Explosive Trap or Reeve. It's going to be hard to say for sure. I'm going to try to level using Reeve because I can test that. I've already tested Explosive Trap in the past, so I know that works. You can trivialize all the bosses very quickly in the early game with Explosive Trap. So if you want to just fall back on that, that is a reliable thing to do. You still grab Frost Blades, just keep it in your offhand. Use Explosive Trap until Act 4 when you get multi-strike, and then switch over to Frost Blades. That's always your option, and I'll add that to the notes as well. But yeah, that's kind of the backup, is use Explosive Trap until Act 4, maybe Reeve potentially. So outside of those two things, we're also going to be getting a new mastery. So the attack mastery is going to have strike skills which target additional enemies, can do so from 30% farther away. That's going to be replaced with strike skills target 1 additional enemy. Okay, So the closest strike mastery we have is this one down here, Gladiator's Perseverance. As you can see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points away, and then 7 points for allocating the mastery. Now, we would be doing this earlier in the game before we have our cluster jewels. So let's see if I have a tree here before we have our cluster jewel set up. Okay, so I'm just going to switch everything over really quick so I can explain what we're going to do. I'll do it to the mapping setup, the 78 through 90. Okay, so what we would do is we would spec out of some damage, because normally here we'd have Frost Blades, and we'd be gem swapping between elemental damage with attacks and Ancestral Call. All right, so we have that set up. And as you can see with the new like elusive effect and everything, we would have 3.3 million with Ancestral Call. And then when we swapped over, we would have 4.4 million. So that would be our normal setup as we start to get up towards red maps, like probably through yellow and red maps. What we would do instead here is we would spec out of 7 points, so Elemental Mastery, all these Crit Claw nodes, and then the Elemental Focus nodes, that's 7 points. And then we would spec down here, and I'll just allocate this mastery, and it will be the additional strike. We now no longer need Ancestral Call, and we can permanently have the damage link. And as you can see, we have a higher damage than we had previously, and we can just keep this up permanently, basically. So that means, and we'll keep this until we get an additional strike on our gloves, which we can do either through the influence, either I think it's Searing Exarch, it might be Eater of Worlds, but it's one of those two, or alternatively Warlord's Influence gloves. If we get a pair of those, we can spam them for additional strike. And then once we get that, which might be a while, but once we get that, we have 7 points to take out, and then we just respec them into cluster jewels. So it kind of works out. So yeah, we have kind of a nice little thing that allows us to actually map with our full 5 or 6 link, and that will just speed things up considerably. So we now have much smoother progression to getting a strike. We can no longer anoint Tribal Fury, but to be honest, that wasn't super reasonable to do unless you're really into blights early on anyway, because it required a gold, silver, and opalescent. So that was kind of a little bit of a gnarly thing to do regardless. So now, yeah, we just have this kind of placeholder until we get additional strike gloves, then we pop it right out and we start putting points into cluster jewels. So that is really nice there. Okay. And lastly, we will be changing, and I have to go over this more, but we're going to be changing our Atlas strategy. The reasoning for this, in the early and mid game specifically, we'll still probably transition into the same stuff late game because we're going to need a lot of the same stuff. But for early and mid game, we're now going to be going towards Harbinger. So now it is going to be Syndicate, Essence, Strongbox, and Harbinger for early mid game. The reasoning being is because now we have access to Fracturing Orbs. We are still going to minorly want some Harvest nodes, of course. Harvest is still going to be good, but this inclusion is going to be huge for gearing and is going to make this build way easier to progress in solo self-found. It already was not hard to progress in solo self-found. I got to the point where I could basically trivialize pinnacle bosses within 8 days of solo self-found. It's very doable. A better player could probably do even better, especially after the damage buffs that Frost Blades is going to be receiving. But yeah, we're going to get all the Harbinger stuff because Fracturing Orb and the splinters associated with it are going to be dropping. So the Harbinger fracture random modifier on a rare item with at least 4 modifiers, locking it in place. This can't be used on influence, synthesized, or fractured items. We're going to want to get a bunch of these, and we're also going to go harder. Before, we only got 2 of the notables for the essences. We're going to be getting more of those now. So basically, we're going to be getting all 4 of the notables for essences for 2 reasons. One, because we're going to want more higher tier essences, so that we can fracture the essence mod. Basically, what we're going to be trying to do is we're going to be taking claws, and we're going to get the highest tier of essence. We're going to be for either cold damage, attack speed, or crit chance. And then we're going to be using a fracturing orb to try to fracture those. And then we can use, if we successfully do it, and we can use annuls during this process too. If we hit a 6 property claw and we want to increase our odds and we have extra annuls because we're doing Harbinger, we can do this. And we're still doing Strongbox because we're still going to want scarabs. We can be using Harbinger scarabs basically all the time, and we can use our extra essence stuff that we're not using because we're going to be essence crafting less now as far as crafting gear. We're going to be more focused on, because of this, we're going to be more focused on essence crafting than harvest crafting. So we can use our extra harvest juice basically to switch over the essences that we get to the ones we need, and everything like that, or essences that we don't need into ones that we'll actually use. So we'll be doing that as well. And yeah, we're basically going to be using these fracturing orbs, try to get the tier 1 fractured essence onto things. And we're going to do this for claws first, probably going to do it for body armor, might do it for shields. We could even do something really crazy and later on be looking for specifically Alhazman or Hunter influence shields and try to fracturing orb the 30% reservation efficiency on those. That's a little bit of a stretch goal, but and getting Hunter's Exalteds and stuff like that. But yeah, our entire mid-game crafting strategy is going to change, and it should allow us to get much better gear much faster, and that's going to accelerate us to the point where we're going to have pinnacle bosses on farm much quicker, and the increase in damage is probably going to improve our ability to take down Ubers, especially considering our backup plan was to get a God, what is it called? Keep forgetting things. Whispers of Doom anoint on Yoke of Suffering later on, and then getting a pair of Southbounds with the corruption to have elemental weakness on hit. Even though the increased effect was removed, so was the reduced effect of curses on bosses. On the pinnacle bosses and stuff, which was 66%. So even with the increased effect, previously we were only getting 9% penetration. Now, even with the nerf to elemental weakness, we'll get 15% penetration. So not only are we going to be doing accounting for both the Withering Step nerf and the Frost Blades damage effectiveness, if you combine those, we end up getting about a little over 16%, maybe 16 to 18% more damage than we previously had. But we're also on our backup setup for Uber bossing going to be getting 6% additional penetration on top of that, which is a little bit more damage. It's not a ton more, but it is a little bit more. And those two things combined should mean that we can freeze Ubers much, much, much more easily, especially with the 100% increased chance to freeze with Southbound. So yeah, it's pretty big. A lot of huge changes. I'll be updating the POB, including all of the notes and stuff, but I'll also leave this POB because it's still going to be mostly accurate in the description below, along with the playlist on all the previous Frost Blades Trickster stuff. That will be my league starter. I think it's going to be insanely powerful this league. This has been Ryan from Behind Eyes Gaming, and I will see you next time. Bye.